Welcome to our channel, where we dive into the most chilling and disturbing true scary stories. Tonight, we have 3 tales that will haunt you long after you've heard them. These stories are not for the faint of heart, so if you dare to continue, be prepared to feel a chill run down your spine. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more spine-tingling content. Every week, we bring you the most terrifying encounters and paranormal experiences from around the world. By subscribing, you'll never miss a tale that could keep you up at night. So, without further ado, let's dive into the darkness and explore the haunting tale of Room 104, a hotel room with a sinister past that continues to terrify its guests. Sit back, turn off the lights, and let the terror begin. There's something unnerving about staying in a hotel room. The thought that countless strangers have occupied the same space before you can be unsettling. But for the guests of Room 104 at the old Maplewood Inn, the experience was far more terrifying. This room had a dark history, one that left a mark on anyone who stayed there. The Maplewood Inn was a quaint, picturesque hotel in a small town. It catered to tourists looking for a peaceful getaway. However, Room 104 had a reputation that contradicted the hotel's serene image. It was said that anyone who stayed in the room would experience unexplainable phenomena. Objects would move on their own, whispers could be heard in the dead of night, and an overwhelming sense of dread would fill the room. One evening, a businessman named David checked into the Maplewood Inn. He was exhausted from a long day of meetings and just wanted to rest. The receptionist handed him the key to Room 104, and a shiver ran down David's spine as he took it. He shook off the uneasy feeling, attributing it to his fatigue, and made his way to the room. As soon as David entered Room 104, he felt a heavy atmosphere. The air was thick, and an odd smell lingered. He tried to ignore it and settled in for the night. But as he lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. He kept hearing faint whispers, just loud enough to be unsettling but too soft to make out any words. David tried to convince himself it was just his imagination, but the whispers grew louder. He turned on the bedside lamp and scanned the room, but there was nothing there. He decided to leave the light on and try to get some sleep. As he closed his eyes, he felt a cold breeze brush against his face. The window was closed and the air conditioning was off. Terrified, David jumped out of bed and checked the room again. He found nothing amiss. Determined to get some sleep, he crawled back into bed, but the whispers returned, this time accompanied by the sound of footsteps. He could hear them pacing back and forth at the foot of his bed. David's heart pounded in his chest as he sat up and turned on the light again. This time, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the corner of the room. It was dark and indistinct, but its presence was undeniable. The figure didn't move, but David could feel its eyes on him. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to look away. The figure slowly started to move toward him, and David could feel the temperature in the room drop. Just as the figure was about to reach the bed, David gathered the courage to leap out of bed and run out of the room. He didn't stop until he reached the lobby, where he breathlessly told the receptionist what had happened. The receptionist listened with a knowing look and nodded slowly. David demanded to be given a different room, and the receptionist obliged without hesitation. As he handed David a new key, he quietly mentioned that he wasn't the first guest to report such experiences in Room 104. David spent the rest of the night in a different room, but he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The next day, David checked out of the hotel and vowed never to return. Room 104 continued to haunt him, and he couldn't shake the memory of the shadowy figure. To this day, the Maplewood Inn remains open, but Room 104 is permanently closed to guests. Its dark past and the terrifying experiences of those who stayed there remain a chilling mystery. The great outdoors can be a place of peace and solitude, but for some, it can turn into a nightmare. This was the case for a camper named Emily, who decided to spend a weekend alone in the dense forest of the Pacific Northwest. She was an experienced camper and loved being surrounded by nature. Little did she know, this trip would be unlike any other. Emily arrived at her campsite on a Friday afternoon. The sun was shining and the forest was alive with the sounds of birds and rustling leaves. She set up her tent and built a small fire, looking forward to a weekend of relaxation. As night fell, she sat by the fire enjoying the tranquility. But as the darkness deepened, she began to feel uneasy. She dismissed the feeling, attributing it to the natural sounds of the forest. However, as she prepared to go to sleep, she heard a distinct snapping of branches nearby. Emily froze, listening intently. The sound grew closer, and she could make out the heavy footsteps of someone or something moving through the underbrush. Her heart raced as she strained to see through the darkness. She saw a shadowy figure moving just beyond the reach of her campfire's light. It was tall and humanoid, but its movements were unnatural, almost predatory. Emily grabbed her flashlight and shone it toward the figure, but it vanished as soon as the light touched it. Terrified, Emily retreated to her tent and zipped it up tightly. She lay there, clutching her flashlight, her ears straining for any sound. The footsteps returned, circling her tent. She could hear the creature's heavy breathing and the occasional growl. It was as if it was toying with her, waiting for the right moment to strike. Emily's mind raced as she tried to think of a way to escape. She knew she couldn't stay in the tent all night, but the thought of facing whatever was out there was equally terrifying. She decided to wait until dawn, hoping the creature would leave with the rising sun. The hours passed slowly, and the creature continued to circle her tent. Emily could feel its presence, a malevolent force that seemed to be drawing closer with each passing moment. Just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, the first light of dawn began to filter through the trees. The footsteps and growls ceased, and Emily cautiously unzipped her tent. She stepped out into the early morning light, her heart still pounding. The campsite was eerily silent, and there was no sign of the creature. Relieved, but still shaken, Emily quickly packed up her gear and left the forest. As she made her way back to civilization, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The memory of the shadowy figure and its predatory movements haunted her. She vowed never to camp alone again, and to this day she warns others about the dangers that lurk in the woods. The forest may be a place of beauty and tranquility, but it can also hide dark and malevolent forces. Emily's encounter serves as a chilling reminder that we are not always alone, even in the most remote places. Sometimes, the shadows conceal more than just darkness. Imagine the feeling of being watched, but when you turn around, there's no one there. This was the terrifying reality for Sarah, a young woman who began to notice strange occurrences in her life. It started with small things, objects moved from their usual places, odd noises in the middle of the night, and the constant feeling of being watched. Sarah lived alone in a small apartment. She was a college student, juggling classes and a part-time job. Her life was busy, but she couldn't ignore the unsettling feeling that something was wrong. She first noticed it when she would come home to find items in her apartment had been moved. At first, she thought it was just her imagination, but the occurrences became more frequent. One night, as Sarah was studying in her bedroom, she heard a faint tapping sound coming from the living room. She paused, listening intently. The tapping continued, rhythmic and deliberate. She cautiously walked to the living room but found nothing out of the ordinary. The sound stopped as soon as she entered the room. Sarah tried to brush it off, but the tapping sound returned night after night. It seemed to follow her from room to room. She began to feel like she was being followed by an unseen presence. Her friends noticed her growing anxiety and suggested she talk to a professional, but Sarah was hesitant. Things took a darker turn when Sarah started receiving strange phone calls. The caller never spoke, but she could hear breathing on the other end. The calls came at all hours, and no matter how many times she changed her number, they persisted. Sarah was terrified, feeling more and more isolated. One evening, as she was preparing to go to bed, she heard a loud crash in her kitchen. She ran to see what had happened and found all the cabinets open and their contents strewn across the floor. Panic set in as she realized that whatever was tormenting her was escalating its actions. Desperate for answers, Sarah installed security cameras in her apartment. She hoped to catch a glimpse of who or what was behind the disturbances. The footage she captured was chilling. The cameras showed objects moving on their own, doors opening and closing, and shadows flitting across the rooms. But there was no clear figure. Nothing she could identify. Sarah's fear grew as the activity in her apartment intensified. She could no longer sleep, eat, or focus on her studies. She felt like she was losing her mind. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a cold hand brush against her face. She jumped up, but there was no one there. The final straw came when Sarah found a message scrawled on her bathroom mirror in what looked like red paint. It read, "I'm always here." That was enough for her. She packed a bag and left her apartment, seeking refuge with a friend. She couldn't return to the place that had become a nightmare. Sarah's story is a chilling reminder that sometimes the things that haunt us aren't always visible. The unseen stalker that tormented her remains a mystery, leaving her with unanswered questions and lingering fear. To this day, Sarah cannot shake the feeling that she is still being watched, no matter where she goes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, please give us a thumbs up and share your own scary experiences in the comments below. We love hearing your tales of terror and the unknown. Don't forget to subscribe for more terrifying tales. Every week, we bring you new stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat and leave you questioning what lurks in the shadows. Until next time, stay safe and stay scared. Remember, the darkness is always closer than you think.